My name is Jeanne Jalandoni, and I am a 2025 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. So the core of my work is mainly inspired by family stories that my mom told me about her memories in the Philippines. She would always start stories like, once upon a time in the Philippines. When I was really young, all of my grandparents passed away, so I had this lifelong curiosity of who they were, what kind of lives they lived, and that sparked a curiosity in doing personal research on Filipino-US history. I encapsulate all these different histories, and what does that mean as someone who has never been to the Philippines and grew up in America? So a lot of my work deals with creating a tangible image of Filipino-American identity. This piece is based on a photograph of my mother when she was a teenager. This is her childhood dog, Princess. The Water Buffalo figure series started around 2018, and around that time my mom was battling breast cancer. So I initially invented this character to give strength back to my mom, but then it just kind of emerged into this sort of avatar for myself to battle other psychological aspects of identity and culture. The water buffalo is the national animal of the Philippines and represents them as hardworking and strong. I'm subverting a lot of meaning by including that on top of my mom's body. This is my weaving station here at Golden. What you see here is one of my pin looms of a milkfish, which is a native fish of the Philippines. I use it a lot in my work. The dog, I created a pin weaving out of that, and I used this sketch as my loom. Basically, I charted out every half an inch, put push pins in the wall, and then thread it through and weave the dog. But the fun part about this piece, especially as it's my first time airbrushing, I had a lot of fun playing with the different layers and colors. Yeah, I mean, tension is a big deal. Coming here, I was trying to figure out a way to stretch out my yardage of yarn, and I came up with the system where I just looped my warp on a stretcher bar and then counting each individual strand, just sort of combing through it. What I'm planning to do is called a double weave. They will have different images, and through the process of weaving, I can command which layers to bring to the surface to weave. This will be like a way to manually collage images, but the interesting part will be how I paint certain images and what comes up and the surprise of that. Coming to the Golden Foundation, I was really interested in finding alternative ways of painting. I think my process has expanded in a way that I didn't imagine it could. After knowing what I can do with materials, how far I could push paint and medium, I just felt like I was learning how to paint again.
My name is Wang Chen, and I am a 2025 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. I am a multidisciplinary artist. My work is combining painting, digital animation, costume making, and I do performance. I create my own sound. Some of the things that inspired my work are the environment around me. I'm not American, I came here in 2010. My work is dealing a lot with my identity and my displacement, and I'll talk about what is happening around the society, but through the big umbrella about how digital world is being informed how we think. So my work is not purely digital. I'm a video artist, but the whole process making is really physical. It takes so many frames. I think this walk session is like 90 drawings and it's 5 seconds walking, and then I have multiple scenes. It's frustration about making animations. The moments I enjoy the painting the most is definitely not the beginning, because beginning is lots of tracing. You know, like last night I just tracing. This board is back and forth. It's like 3 hours tracing. You never know how they move. It's rewarding, but I have to be really patient to wait for the rewarding system come to you in the end. And that's the big surprise with turning something physical to digital, changing the presence of an image or an object into something complete, not familiar with. After I got here with all the workshops, understanding materials, and then try out different materials, able to have access material to practice more with more textured, it changed the process. You see that the lightweight, the richness, so the texture definitely adds a lot to my animations, and then suddenly there's big surprise elements jump into the scene. And it creates animations that are so different than what I used to do. It's like open a new door to look at painting really differently. To emphasize on material itself, to our body, that's how I make costumes and performance, is to really get in touch with the physical stuff around us, the feeling, the movements, the actions, even you're eating, you're doing the most awkward movements. That's how real it is for us. My work itself goes back this loop about I use lots of technology, but it all comes to the end of it's so much physical work and so materialistic too. These are the hats I made when I was back home. So I bought them here. They are made of paper and fiber textures because I use lots of threads and yarns. This is like the first batch I made them. If I could replace yarns with more texture, the scene that looks like a fabric. And then I start to do test and then have that such a nice dripping compared with yarn. Yarn fabric, they don't have that, the weight. With all the workshops and even with a studio visit with all the technicians, I think it was kind of resetting the way of how I think about art. You have the freedom to explore things, you do whatever you want, but you also forget about, we can be super nerdy too about material itself. I totally forget how painting can be so technical and so variations of doing different kinds of things.
My name is Tony Shore, and I'm a 2025 artist resident at the Sam and Adele Golden Foundation for the Arts. I grew up in Southwest Baltimore. I was making paintings about my family, but because it was sort of a working class neighborhood and pretty low income, velvet paintings were fairly common. You'd see them hanging on the wall, almost like the poor man's fine art. I started painting on black surfaces, but it was a natural transition to just say, why not paint these people on black velvet? So it became this idea of painting people on black velvet who would own black velvet paintings, and taking both of them and sort of elevating them to make the people worthy of being portrayed. One of the things that people don't realize about the paintings on velvet is how unforgiving the material is. The idea that because there's no paint that matches that richness of the black, you can't really fix mistakes once you cover the black. When I first got here to the residency, I started playing with the pan pastels, which I had never really used before. I've used pastel sticks in the past, but the pan pastels really felt more like paint to me and gave me an opportunity to sort of experiment and get more brushy strokes. And it really gave me a sense of the fleshiness of what I was doing. It felt like I was building up layers of paint instead of layers of pastel. And it's given me a chance to break away from the things that I normally do. Nighttime is a big influence for me. I'm drawn to sort of these low-lit situations that have really cinematic qualities, the darkness enveloping and sort of almost hugging you in a weird way, that it creates this environment that, ironically for me, kind of feels like safety at times, even though there can be some really intense and scary things happening in some of the imagery too. I will oftentimes find the hours when everyone else is sleeping to be the most productive, to get into this special place where magic things can happen that you don't expect. So one of the things I wanted to experiment with while I was here was the idea of working with surfaces that weren't the same as, but had similar qualities to the way that the velvet works. With the velvet paintings, there's a backing that is black, but then the nap sticks up and most of the paint sits on the top of the nap. So I thought, what materials are available from Golden that I could use to try and replicate that in some way? And what I found was the coarse pumice gel. If I use like a dry brush technique, the black would still kind of come through in a similar way to what the velvet does. I bought a couple of these styrofoam heads. see what it was like to paint three-dimensionally with the velvet, to actually build out the form and turn it into more of like a self-portrait. So it feels very folky to me, but it's kind of interesting. I've always had ideas about how I could do things maybe in a more three-dimensional way with the velvet, and this is one step closer to that. It's still sort of very experimental early stages, but we'll see what happens. While here, I've tried to stay open to everything and just try everything, not knowing what would come out of it. In my own studio, at this point, it's like I'm making work and thinking thematically about the next show. And being at the Golden Residency gave me a chance to be a student again, and I really like that.